Let's get spooky and silly in the summertime. We're talking the Latex Avenger and Halloween Man crossover with creators Drew Edwards, Dan Price, and Paulo Hernández on our Byword Big Talk this week. The Byword begins now. Welcome into an exclusive episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. I'm here with my buddy Dave. I'm Kris, and we're here to bring you the most pressing news, nerd commendations, and big talk material in the nerd multiverse. Before we get into our Byword Big Talk with a three-headed monster, that is creators Drew Edwards, Dan Price, and Paulo Hernández, about the Halloween Man meets Latex Avenger crossover event that is coming to Indiegogo on the 6th of July. It is, of course, first time for... Nerd News! Dave, this is something we've touched on in the Nerd News segment before, but it bears repeating, it would seem.
Yeah, so WTF is going on with Ezra Miller. The actor is facing a whole slew of legal problems and has since vanished from the face of the earth, apparently. So Miller is facing legal issues in Hawaii, in Massachusetts, and now in North Dakota. Now, we've previously talked about the fact that there were some assault allegations in Hawaii. That seemed to have slowly blown over, but now things have really taken a dark turn. There's a North Dakota tribal court has issued a protective order against Miller due to allegations that they had groomed an 18-year-old beginning at age 12. Things then took another bizarre turn as Miller posted several images on Instagram, apparently including quotes like, "You cannot touch me, I'm in another universe." There was also sort of a lengthy paragraph about how they are trying to stay away from negative people and their ill intent. And then Miller appears to have deleted their Instagram account, and now they are sort of in the wind. There have been some reports that people have been trying to, find him, to speak to him, due to their legal issues, and ultimately are not able to find them right now. So obviously this is a very fraught situation. It also raises some questions for the nerd world, particularly because Miller's Flash movie, which also features the premiere of the new Supergirl, as well as the return of Michael Keaton as Batman, that movie is set to release here pretty soon. And WB finds themselves once again in a quagmire of a situation because one of their movies is in a very awkward spot. How do you proceed with something like this? The movie is by, all accounts finished. And do you release as is, hold back and try to see this all blow over, try to recast and reshoot an entire movie, which seems not exactly cost effective. The whole thing is a huge mess, and there already have been reports that WB has decided, even if the Flash movie is a success, that they will no longer be working with Miller moving forward. So, oof, Kris, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, so the reports that I saw said that virtually every scene would have to be reshot, and basically the entire movie would have to be scrapped if they were to recast the role. It's virtually impossible because just from looking at the outside looking in, I believe that Miller is portraying multiple versions of Barry Allen. So kind of like some side-by-side type stuff. So not only are they playing the main universe, DCEU, Barry, they're playing small universe versions of the character as well. So virtually every scene contains them in it, which is, next to impossible. So the decision would be, either release it as is or to just scrap it all together, which, rocking a hard place here. This is truly just a mind-boggling situation. For those of us in the know that have kind of followed the track record, the writing was kind of on the wall with these assault allegations and everything, and clearly someone who is not in a stable situation mentally, and it just seems to have precipitously gotten worse and worse. And I'm really not sure what the right answer is here. Clearly not an individual that they want to continue working with, as they've stated. So this is just a really, really crazy situation, and another, like you said, a quagmire, like a really difficult thing that, a connected universe that is really struggling to get its grounding with, for so many reasons, in the DCEU. And for a lot of folks, this was like a touchstone moment that they were hoping that would kind of give some stability to this connected universe going into the future. And unfortunately, it does not look like that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I think your nerd news story this week doesn't exactly add stability to the DCEU either. I'm not even sure how to respond to this story. So let's dig in, man.
Is this the part where we break into song?
I refuse to sing.
Okay.
I do not want to scare off our audience. I just, I like my audience right where it is. I don't want them to run away.
Okay, so the Oscar award-winning film Joker, from 2019, for which Joaquin Phoenix earned the Academy Award for Best Actor, grossed $1 billion, is indeed in development of a sequel. However, some interesting news came to light this week regarding the sequel, which is set to be titled Joker Folie à Deux. I hope that's okay. My French is not that strong. Director of the initial film and the sequel, Todd Phillips, who is co-writing the script with Scott Silver, revealed on social media that is the title of it. And sources are also saying that it is indeed a musical, and that negotiations are underway with none other than Lady Gaga to portray the role of one Harley Quinn. Now, this film universe, of course, takes place in a different universe than that of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. So we're dealing again with a multiversal situation, which seems so much as the du jour thing with nerd media right now. Like multiverse, do you got any more of that multiverse type stuff? So but yeah, so the Joker 2 is set to be a musical, and they are trying very hard to get Lady Gaga in the role of one Harley Quinn. So, Dave, your thoughts?
No. Like, I'll just be honest, I have like zero interest in the Joker and Harley Quinn breaking into song. Like, I'm all for different interpretations, and I'm sure there's an audience for something like this. And if that's what you're into, then bless you and more power to you. But I absolutely have no interest in a Joker Harley Quinn musical in any way, shape, or form. Be honest with you, I've not even seen the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix up until this point, because I'm usually not particularly interested in movies that exclusively focus on villains. Now, I will say that I've heard good things about the movie, but I also think it sounds like there's a tonal dissonance there between what the first movie was and what they're wanting to do with the sequel. I find it difficult, from what I know of the Joker movie, to imagine that a musical is the logical place to go next after that. To be honest with you, I checked the calendar when I saw the news story, because I thought it must be April Fool's Day. It's so bizarre and out there. And although I'll be watching the news or surrounding this project very carefully, I cannot imagine that I will experience any kind of joy watching it, and so I have no plans to watch it, Chris.
Yeah, I have not watched the first film either. I think that's a sentiment that we share. Is for me, I really, we talked about this with Watchmen and things like Gotham. Is like I deal enough with cynicism, and I come to media, whether that's comics, film, or what have you, looking for escapism. And so something like Joker is just not for me. It's not made for me. And that's totally okay. I also very reticent to celebrate like the outcome of and the results of the Joker. I know that like at the end of the film, like there's a Joker, for lack of a better term, like cult that kind of follows that kind of behavior. And so like kind of the reaction coming out of that film, while it was well received, what have you, is like it kind of incited some latent things in a lot of young men particularly, and like not qualities that I would want to encourage in a population. So it's just not for me. As far as this goes, I'm a huge musical fan. I was raised on musicals. Whether or not this could work or it's just an absolutely catastrophic disaster, I'll tell you this. I'm more interested in watching this than I am the original one. So time will tell.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the best attitude to have towards it. I don't think I'm going to be able to bring myself to actually watch it. Yeah, I guess you're right. You know, time will tell.
All right, that wraps up our nerd news segments. What are your reaction to these stories, both Ezra Miller and Folie à Deux? I think I was better that time. Hit us up on social media at Nerd Byword on Twitter and Instagram. And stick around, because after this, our first break, we're going to back with our Byword Big Talk with the folks that are around Latex Avenger and the Halloween Man crossover.
Hi, this is Tony Tolato. Years ago, I made a decision that I would host a guest-oriented genre podcast, and Sci-Fi Talk was born. I've been very lucky to talk to amazing people like production designer Bo Welch. And you do creepy really well, so
Why, thank you, Tony.
Sometimes guests give me a sample of the characters they play, like Second Sister from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
Who's your master, Padawan?
You can find Sci-Fi Talk wherever you get your podcast. Has guests you know and guests you should know in genre entertainment.
Welcome back to the meat and potatoes segment of this episode, better known as the Byword Big Talk. And today, it's a party, folks. We've got not one, not two, but three special guests here to talk about the crossover event that is Halloween Man and the Latex Avenger. We've got Drew Edwards, who is the writer-creator of Halloween Man. We've got Dan Bryce, who is the creator of the Latex Avenger. And Paulo Hernández, who is the artist on the book. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Byword.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
We always like to start each interview with our guest's nerd origin story. In this case, the question is really twofold. You're all creators as well. What were your first experiences with nerd media, and how did you get started in the business of making comics? So we've got a round table here. Drew, we're going to start with you.
So I grew up in a very rural area of Texas called Possum Kingdom. So I didn't have a local comic shop or anything like that growing up.
Like the Toadies, like the Toadies song.
Exactly like the Toadies song. The Toadies song is taken from my home.
Yes.
What I would do as a kid, though, how I got into comics is I would jump on my bike and I would ride up to the local library, and my library had all these like hardbound comics that went all the way back to the 30s and up into like the 70s. So like my first comic books were actually mostly golden and silver age comics. And you know, the newest comic I probably got to read as a kid was Tomb of Dracula, ironically. And that really helped kind of form my tastes in comics for a long time. I was actually talking about this before we started recording. My favorite characters are the Fantastic Four, which are very tied to the Silver Age. Like I just really love that whole time period. And the moment I got old enough to understand that making comics could be a job, that's really when I started to pursue that.
All right, Dan, what about you?
Man, it's not too far off from Drew's. Superman and Condor Man, those two movies as a little kid were the Christopher Reeve Superman movie. That was I had a red towel that I ran around the house, wearing at all times. Yeah, and Condor Man, which was a Disney movie, that was about a comic book artist who would only do in his comic what he could do in real life. So he was Condor Man, and he flew around with these gigantic wings. That movie's awesome too. So those two things, Saturday morning cartoons. And then when I was 8 years old, there was a collected, like a mini series that Marvel did called Marvel Saga back in the 80s. And it just collected old 60s, Silver Age stuff and put the whole history of the Marvel universe together for people who were trying to pick it up. And that and X-Men 207 with that cover of Wolverine ripping through the cover by John Romita Jr. Those were the things that kicked it off for me. And it was, and I was hooked. I didn't know I wanted to do comics until I was about 16 when Image became a thing, and you had people creating their own books and doing their own thing. And once that became a reality that you could make your own comics, create your own characters, then I wanted in. That's when it really became a thing for me.
Okay, what about you, Paulo?
Me, I actually got started with anime. My brother would show me all these animes, and back then there was only a few animes out there, and so I got to see Ninja Scroll and Pat Labor and Rama One Half, and all those animes blew me away. I thought they were fantastic stories and stuff, and that's what got me into wanting to make my own stories. But then later on, I started. I think my brother came into town because he was in the military, and he brought over a stack of comic books, and that his friend had that he had doubles of, and he wanted him to try to sell the comics, see how much money he can get. He ended up not being able to sell a lot of them because there were a lot of the 90s comics that they made way too many of them, and he ended up just giving them to me, and that's when I started reading them. And at first I thought it was a money thing. I'll go little by little and sell them so I can get some snacks at the corner store or something. And I ended up just reading them, and I fell in love with them, and I ended up keeping them, and I still have them to this day. And it got me into comics, from anime to comics, and I started really liking indie comics. And and that was in middle school, and in high school I saw a lot of artists drawing out anime stuff and hybrid of anime and Western style. And I was like, I want to do that. I have all these stories. I want to be able to draw. So I started drawing in high school. And ever since then, I always wanted to be in the indie scene, to make indie comics and stuff, and tell stories that you don't normally see in the comic shelves that, from the big two, like Marvel and DC and stuff.
Do you have a particular character or two that you used to doodle that was your go-to one when you started drawing?
Oh, geez. I know that even in early on, there was a character of my own character that I would draw. And every time I would have a drawer's block or writer's block or whatever, I didn't know what to draw. So I would draw this character, and it was my version of it's like Neil Gaiman's Death. It's a girl, and it's sort of the same thing, but it was my my of Death as a girl, and I would always draw her. And after I draw her, I would always all these ideas would flood in. So then I would keep going. So that's what that was my go-to thing to draw. And the name of my character was Novalin. So
So another question for each of you. Who would you list as your greatest influence as a creator? Let's start with you, Paulo.
My greatest influence, it's probably going to be Adam Warren. It was the first time that I saw like a really good mix of both the anime style, manga style, mixed with Western style kind of comics, and I really like that mesh between the two. And ever since then, like I love his stuff. I love reading his comic books, and so he's been an inspiration to me to get better with my art. But I'd have to say that my greatest influence as a creator has to be my community, like Drew and Dan, and I really like that they keep pushing forward, through every obstacle that comes about. Like everybody in the art community, like they all have day jobs, but they do, at night they're grinding out pages and comics and ideas and writing stuff. And I really like that. And I love the artist community that I have here in Austin. And they influence me every day to keep going.
That seems to be like a real hotbed. Like recently, Austin is a happening spot for the comics community.
I like hearing that.
Yeah.
Austin, it's always been had a good vibe to it when it came to the comic book creators. I was always impressed because we've all known each other probably about 10 years at this point, guys?
At least. Yeah.
Yeah. And it has always been amazing when you saw all the comic creators in Austin come together, because there'd be oodles of them. I mean, like now it's kind of slimmed down a little bit. Everybody's kind of gotten older, kind of, settled into their lives, but they're still out there and still working, so we don't see each other as much. But yeah, there's a lot of really fun stuff going on in Austin when it comes to indie comics.
All right, Dan, how about you? Greatest influence as a creator?
Oh, greatest influence as a creator. I mean, Frank Miller, Jack Kirby, John Romita Jr., Matt Wagner, Francis Lennell Yu is somebody I've gotten into in recent years. Paulo, because he's my inspiration. No, I mean, that's as an artist. As a writer, I'm more literary as a writer. I like comic book writers, but I think probably Kurt Vonnegut is the biggest influence on my writing, as well as, but yeah, Miller to me is the total package as an indie comics creator. He's an artist, he's a writer, he can do the whole damn thing. To me, he's the total package.
And finally, Drew, what are your thoughts there?
Well, outside of the initial 1-2 punch of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby because of their run on Fantastic Four, I do have some more contemporary influences. I always say my favorite writer is Grant Morrison. Like pretty much if Grant Morrison's name is on the book, I'm gonna pick it up. I like most people, most comic book writers of my generation, I do owe a great debt to Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, all those UK invasion writers. I'm also a big horror fan, so a lot of my influences are horror directors, going all the way back to the Golden Age. Like I love James Whale, I love Terrence Fisher, stuff more from my childhood. I love Sam Raimi. I think almost everybody picks up on the Sam Raimi influence in my work. I love Clive Barker. Like all of those things is this kind of stew that comes together that makes my writing style. I'm also an old punk rocker, so like I owe a lot to like the punk ethos of do it yourself and just throw yourself into thing and let passion dictate, and you'll learn on the way as you go. Because I certainly, when I started making comics, it was all passion and no precision. I've gotten better since then, but if it wasn't for being really into punk rock, I don't think I would have really followed this life path.
Okay, so that's like a natural segue. Drew, you got to tell us about the origins of Halloween Man as a character. You kind of hinted at it already, but where did all of this come from?
So Halloween Man, the name Halloween Man comes from the Misfits song, actually, Halloween, because I was trying to come up with the name of a character, and this is when I had relocated from Possum Kingdom to Dallas, and I was just driving around in my car listening to, the Misfits on repeat, and Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. I kept hearing that, and I was like, Halloween Man, that's a good name for a superhero. But as far as like the roots of the character, so there's two things. One, as a monster movie guy, I always wanted to see the monster survive. Like, if you watch a lot of monster movies, be it King Kong, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Wolfman, like at the end of it, they're always sort of, they're wiped out, because the monster is the other, and they have to put the other back in its place at the end of the story. I wanted to continue on past that. I wanted the monster be the good guy. So there was that. There's a deeper thing there, though. I also always say Halloween Man has been my therapy. When I was not even 21 years of age, I'm a twin. And I was in a car accident when I was, young, that killed my twin. And, if I hadn't had this comic, is like a way to give myself something to focus on, is something to make myself get out of bed every morning, something to put my feelings into. I don't think that I would have made, I'm in my 40s now, and I don't think I would have made it this long without that. And even the way the character looks, because he's kind of, asymmetrical, sort of, shades of Phantom of the Opera, shades of Two-Face. That's sort of how I felt, as like I felt like half a monster and half a man. So it was like my way of visualizing that, because I had tremendous survivor guilt and PTSD, and I deal with a lot of mental health issues, not just from that trauma, but from other traumas in my life. I have what's called dissociative identity disorder, which is now only really beginning to get more understood in the larger, larger society. But, Halloween Man has been my way of like dealing with all these different struggles that I've had to have throughout my life. And, I put those feelings in to something that's more positive. It's kind of weird, because everybody reads Halloween Man, they see it as this sort of jovial, funny comic, but I'm processing through a lot of pain with that. And it's just been a really important thing to me in my life. And, I'm grateful for the comics community, sort of like what Paulo and Dan were saying, that they helped me through all that.
First and foremost, I'm sorry for your loss. And I know I tragically lost my grandfather when I was 6 years old. And so decades and decades later, that loss can still be fresh and new. And before we hit the record button, we were talking about escapism, and it's really amazing that you found something that you can pour yourself into and kind of give new life into a character like this. I am very curious. You mentioned DID, and that immediately made me think of a character like Mark Spector. I'm not sure if you've gotten the chance to see the Moon Knight series or read any of the comics. Have you with a character like that kind of being at the forefront? What's your take on that?
So I've never really been into Moon Knight as a comic book character. I did make a point to watch all of the show, because I knew that was going to be a conversation that I was going to have with people. I honestly think the show did a pretty good job of showcasing DID as a condition that you can live with while also still functioning as a superhero story. There was some stuff that was definitely sensationalized to my experience, but that's kind of par for the course. I'll definitely take it over something like Split, Like I felt like it was definitely more sensitive than that. My only major issue with the show is they never actually used the phrase dissociative identity disorder. I feel like for me as an educational tool, that would have made it a lot better. But overall they treated it with sensitivity, and it was well acted, and it had that Marvel Studios gloss on it, which can't be denied. So I think that they did a good job with it. I honestly think in some ways they did. My previous benchmark for this kind of thing in pop culture was, in fact, another superhero show is the Doom Patrol show, which I think had done a fairly good job in its first few seasons. But I think Moon Knight actually did a slightly better job in some ways. So, my hat's off to them for doing the work.
Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
All right, so changing gears, Dan, same question, but obviously with Latex Avenger. That's certainly an attention-grabbing moniker. What's sort of the origin of that character?
All right, so I have, at that point in my life, I had been working for a greeting card company and illustrating humorous Jewish greeting cards.
I did not see it going that way.
No, left. There's gonna be left field comments coming from all over the place. I was working. I was working for. It was mine. It was a humorous Jewish greeting card company. My sister and I had always made the comment, you can't find a funny greeting card for somebody, in the tribe, and so we decided to make a go of it and make a line of greeting cards. Took it to shows all over the country and, had some good clients and did some things with it, but ultimately it did not, pan out. And the main characters of the comic of the card line were these characters that were inspired from my grandparents. And all I had left after the company was over was, a few bucks. And I had these characters, these grandparents, my grandparents, and I called them Saul and Myra Glickman. And so they were actually, those two characters were actually the beginning of Latex Avenger, because I wanted to do something different after that project was done that was so not sweet, not kind, not cuddly, and what could be over the top and ridiculous, and we can make a comic book out of. Because I always, I'd done some stuff in comics early on, but this was really my first big thing. And Latex Avenger was born, and Latex Avenger, he has a sidekick named Spermicidal Foam Lad, and together they repel crime 99.9% of the time. So it's like a superhero satire, Superbad? Family Guy. No, but now I know what you're saying though. Nice. No,
that's immediately when I hear that product, that's immediately what I think of.
So what I often hear about it is people think it reminds them of The Tick, and it reminds them of Orgasmo. Okay, so the movie by the guys from South Park. So I get a lot of that. I'll take that as a compliment, because those are two. Orgasmo is okay. The Tick's awesome. But if that helps paint the picture for people, that's cool. But it's it's this ridiculously over the top. It's an over the top story it's superheroes on steroids to of attitudes and just craziness. So you've got characters like Kosher the Pig, who's like who was a character that he was like the voice of reason in the whole comic. My grandparents are in the comic. You've got Latex Avenger, you got Spermicidal Foam Lad, but then you got like just a host of crazy characters and villains that show up along the way. The one issue that I did was it was called The Wrath of Khan. It was I wrote it, Bonadami drew it, and it took place at a comic book convention. They were going there to sign headshots of themselves for the public, and it was really based on stories that had happened to me and Bon at comic conventions. So we just made an autobiographical tale and put the characters in our place, and just turn the volume up to 11. I mean, I think it's like pro wrestling, the great characters are always the ones with the regular attitudes, with the volume just turned way up. And so that's what we did with what I did with Latex Avenger. It was just over the top ridiculous at all times. I mean, you had a character in the first issue named Manibus, who was a kaiju pot monster that crushed the city and like lit himself on fire and made everybody high. And I mean, just ridiculous stuff. So it was my freshman book. But the first thing I really did as in creator-owned comics, and it kind of led the way to other things. And when Drew said, let's do this, I mean, how do you say no to working with Drew Edwards and Halloween Man? And, so here we are today.
So you've also done work on a series called Bigfoot Knows Karate. So you got to tell us about that.
Sure. So Bigfoot is my fourth creator-owned series, actually. With Latex Avenger, it's heavy comedy, right? And pretty much everything I worked on previous to this was heavy comedy. Latex Avenger, Masters of the Obvious, which was like characters like Dr. Biclops, he's got two eyes, and the Visible Woman, you can't miss her. And I, did that, and then Bigfoot was what happened. So I left comics for a while. I did a thing for the Stan Lee Foundation and POW Entertainment called Excelsior, The Uphill Adventures of a Boy Named Stanley. And after that, Bon and I were both kind of exhausted and needed a break. And a lot of things happened in that time. Bon, unfortunately, actually passed away, which was heartbreaking. And I just needed a break from comics. And Drew and I were talking about this crossover that we'll talk more about in a little bit. We started talking about this, and some other things happened, and I did something with Drew and Paulo as well. We did a book together, and it got me working on, okay, well, it's time to do something different. And I've been sketching this Bigfoot who does, doing kung fu and karate, and and my co-writer on Bigfoot had seen what I was doing, and I'd been doodling it for a few years, like 2017, 2018. And he's like, you've got to do something with this. Well, the pandemic and boredom and all of that just kind of wore in. And my wife said to me, why don't you make another comic book? It's been years since you've done that. The kids are all kind of grown up now. Let's, go ahead. And so now I've got this gentle cryptid warrior who lives in a world where anyone can be the hunter and anyone can be the prey at any given time. And he goes up against Kung Fu Thulu in this, it's Bigfoot versus Kung Fu Thulu in like the cryptid showdown of the century. It's action adventure. It's psychological thriller. It's Godzilla versus Kong meets Kill Bill. With just a ridiculous twist. I put it up on Kickstarter in October and, asked for $1,000 goal on Kickstarter, and we raised $7,300 with 200 plus backers, which I couldn't be more grateful for. It was amazing. And it was just it was a fun way to come back to doing comics. I'm co-writing it, I'm drawing it, and just having a blast. But, it all started with Latex Avenger for me. So to sit here and be working with two of my good friends that I've known for a long time in Austin Comics, it's amazing.
I also correct me if I'm wrong, but I also get like Samurai Jack vibes from this, and that's really cool.
I've heard that a lot too. So that's I've seen Samurai Jack for about 20 minutes about 15 years ago with my nephew. It was beautiful. Right. I remember thinking it was gorgeous. So again, like somebody says to me, it reminds me of Samurai Jack. Awesome. Because it's beautiful work. I've not sat down and watched the series. I look forward to one day sitting down to watch the series, but I've got to finish what I'm working on before I look at that, because I don't ever want to, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things where you don't want anything seeping in, or you don't want to know what's going on. So you don't know. So to kind of keep my mind fresh with the comic, but I love the work that I've seen from Samurai Jack. And so, in fact, an artist named Dennis Valencia did a piece of Bigfoot Knows Karate fan art that had Samurai Jack and Bigfoot together with the Kung Fu Thulu character and the big bad from Samurai Jack. And it was one of like 90 pieces of fan art we received for Bigfoot Knows Karate. And it's just a beautiful piece. So.
All right, so just to change gears to your crossover now, what made you all decide to have a crossover between these two incredibly, let's say, distinctive and different characters?
When Halloween Man started out, it was much more of a comedy book, and it still has a strong connection to comedy, and that's something I think Dan and I share. But it's also just the thrill of working with other characters that are in Texas and in this city. And I think the humor of this is very character based, because you have the Halloween Man characters that are a notch more serious than the characters from the Latex Avenger, and it's very much, the issue very much plays out like the Latex Avenger invading a typical issue of Halloween Man. Like he's kind of your through line into the Halloween Man world in some ways, because this isn't a crossover where you nowadays, like, you would have like the portal open up and they would be going into you'd have two different worlds colliding with each other. This, like, Latex Avenger just kind of shows up in a coffee house in Solar City, which is where Halloween Man lives, and they have an adventure together. It's very old fashioned in that way. It's kind of like the Spider-Man meets Superman issue. I mean, Dan, do you think I'm getting this correct?
No, I think you're nailing it. It's how Latex Avenger made it to Solar City from Get Ontopolis without a car was incredible to me, because he actually has a revoked license and uses a bus pass. So it is very classic old school crossover in that regard. And yeah, I think the through line statement, Drew, is right on the money. It's kind of like when you watch, you're watching your favorite sitcom, and then they're going to spin something off. They're going to do a spinoff. And so they're introducing the characters for the spinoff into the regular story, and then that new one will come out. It's kind of like that, where it's kind of focused. The story is, you've got Latex Avenger and Spermicidal Foam Lad kind of walking through and saying hi, except there's not going to be a spinoff. It's just, they're just kind of walking through and saying hi. And but it's the tension and the comedy between the characters that really makes this. Latex Avenger, being the jerk that he is, finds immediate interest in Lucy Chaplin, Solomon, Halloween Man's girlfriend, and so being just the overly macho schmuck that he is, he can't resist, and calamity ensues, because if a half man half zombie saw some schmuck in a prophylactic condom mask hitting on his girlfriend, how do you think that would go over? And I think you've got a lot of funny looks and a lot of good back and forth between the characters, and I think that it makes it a lot of fun. It's like a comic book sitcom in that regard, like one episode like that.
You say that there's no spinoff, but nothing would make me happier if this reignited interest in the Latex Avenger, and you were able to keep bringing the magic of Latex Avenger to the masses.
It's I appreciate that. I mean, it's just such an honor for him to be coming around in a Halloween Man book and hanging out. Because I mean, like we said, we've known each other a long time, and this isn't the first time we've worked together, the three of us, even, because we did an issue of Halloween Man, the Bat City special years ago, where it was like an all Austin issue of creators working on Halloween Man stories. And Paulo had a story in there that he did the art on. I did art on a story, and that actually started off with originally this crossover that began that whole thing. So it's funny how this crossover has made a lot of different things happen for all of us. It's pretty cool.
Or keeping with the pro wrestling montage, Paulo, what made you tag in and jump into this project in particular?
Being that I think Dan and Drew are amazing comic creators themselves, them asking me to be part of this was like pretty much an honor for me, because I knew that Dan and Bond were really close when they were making the Latex Avenger comic, and so for him to sort of let me have my take on his character, and it not being Bond, like I felt like that was an honor that I really I wanted to take advantage of, and and also I had been wanting to work on more stuff with Drew on Halloween Man. So having both of those things come together in one comic is sort of like a dream come true to me. So I immediately wanted to jump on it as soon as I could. So yeah, when they told me about it, that's what drew me to it, because I really liked the Halloween Man stories. I really liked laughing to Latex Avenger, and so it was pretty awesome how it all came together.
So, Drew, can you give us some details on the crowdfunding specifics for this project?
So we're going to be launching on Indiegogo on July 6th. It's going to run for about 6 weeks. We're trying to raise a grand, which isn't that that big of a goal, but naturally we hope we're going to do even more than that. But that's where our starting goal is, and that's just like the sort of bare bones minimum. We would like to do better and better and better, but crowdfunding is, I think, the thing that I always tell people about crowdfunding is how much work it actually is, and I think Dan would also attest to that.
Here.
Yeah, like I think a lot of people is like, oh, you're just posting a lot on social media about your project. It's very, like, you get kind of exhausted from being in everybody's face. After about a week, like you've caught us now at the start of promoting this, so we're all still like peppy and in good spirits. I think in another few weeks we're gonna have like hoarse voices and be more jaded and cynical. But now I also think crowdfunding is wonderful because it's even the playing field a lot between indies and mainstream books, because you can, if you think that there's going to be an audience for something, you can go out and you can reach out to people and do it. And I definitely know, at least in Texas, hopefully nationwide, but at least in Texas, that there is an interest in these two characters meeting each other. I know I kind of went a little far afield of the initial question, but there you go.
The one-page teaser image that we saw hints at some biting social commentary, caffeinated commentary, should I say. Is that something that readers can expect in this title, or is that something that's traditionally been part of these characters?
I think that other, like Halloween Man, there's definitely like a satirical bent to a lot of the stories. This probably has a lot to say about toxic masculinity as a concept. I think Dan would probably agree with that.
I guess to be more direct, do you guys have bad recent experiences at Starbucks? Is guess what I'm asking?
I've never had a good experience at Starbucks.
Are you looking at the artwork from the variant cover?
That's what he's referring to. Is your excellent homage to Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. When the opportunity came to do a cover, and I was thinking through, I'm like, well, I'm going to do an homage cover or something. I'm looking through a million covers, and I saw Speedy doing heroin. I just thought
okay, so I immediately got it. Okay,
you immediately got it.
I feel cultured now.
You are definitely cultured.
So, in addition to the book itself, are there any additional rewards or incentives that backers can look forward to here?
Yeah, so there's going to be, one of my favorite tiers, and actually, from a crowdfund I did last year, we're actually including some winners in this book. But what I always tend to include is a tier that you can buy into, or you actually can get a cameo in a future issue of Halloween Man. And again, in fact, there are two fans that Paulo is drawing into the book. I also tend to offer a lot of, because I have a big back catalog. Halloween Man is a 22-year-old indie book at this point, and so I tend to offer a lot of the other Halloween Man titles up as something that you can buy along with the new book. And certainly we're going to probably find a way to offer some Latex Avenger books as well.
And we're also going to be doing we're doing our regular edition as well as the deluxe with some extras in there, right, Drew?
Yeah, and a commentary from us as creators. So if you think that we're really witty and want to spend more time with us, you can get a code that will allow you to listen to us talk about the creation of this comic even more.
Now, is there a special tier that includes a Latex Avenger mask, or is that more of a DIY thing?
Oh, that's a DIY project. But if you do that, please hashtag Latex Avenger on Instagram so I can see along with that. I've got to see that. I need to see that. I've been wanting that for years. We
haven't had any Latex Avenger cosplayers at all.
No, there was a Visible Woman cosplayer years back in the day, but I've never had a Latex Avenger cosplayer. And I know a guy who says he's going to do a Bigfoot Knows Karate cosplay, but we'll see when that happens. So.
I always said that when I got cosplayers that I would finally feel successful as a comic book creator, and then I reached that point, and then I had to move up the benchmark. So then I started saying that I needed pornographic fan fiction. As it turns out, somebody actually wrote pornographic Halloween Man fan fiction. So now I have to up it again. I have to up it again. I don't know where to go from there, though.
That sounds like a poll for Twitter waiting to happen.
So indie comics can be, tough sledding. It's a slog sometimes when it comes to getting your name and your work recognized. What advice would each of you give to aspiring creators? Let's go ahead and start with Dan.
All right. If you're a reader or if you're a writer, read. If you're an artist, study everyone. Just look at everything because, like I mentioned, my comic book, the people I look up to in comics, but, I draw inspiration from so much, whether it's comedy movies or just a funny conversation I hear people having. Just be a student of everything that goes on around you and don't give up. Just don't give up. This is hard. If you think this is easy, you're fooling yourself. But we're all lovers of the craft, and so if you want to make a dent in this, really put it out there. I don't know what to tell you to go work for Marvel or DC because that's not my interest. All I know is I want to make great characters and come up with cool IP and tell an awesome story. So my wife told me this when I got back into doing this stuff: have fun. And as long as this keeps being fun, I'll keep doing it. So do that too. Have fun with it.
All right. How about Paulo? What do you think?
Also, as an artist, if you're starting out, you just keep drawing. Don't give up. And I was reading this book about I forgot what it was. I think it was an inspiring artist type of book, and it had a foreword from Adam Warren, which is my favorite artist. And he said, if you want to be famous and you want to be well known and you want to make lots of money, don't get into comics. When you get into comics, it will be hard. It will be tough. It's gonna take you to your limits, but you do it because you love to do it. Don't do it for fame. Don't do it for money. You're going to do it because you love to do it. And that's what's going to give you your staying power. And so when I read that, I was like, wow, that speaks to me. So I was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to be able to tell the stories. And I love this craft. I love doing it. So I'd say get in for the right reasons. Make sure you're going in because you love telling a story or drawing a story or drawing pictures and whatnot.
And finally, Drew.
To kind of dovetail off of what Paulo was just saying, I think get yourself in and ready for the long haul, because comics are an industry and a craft that is very much about the long game. I didn't really have any real success in the comic book industry until I was nearing in on the 20-year mark, and I started to get more renown and more respect. And it wasn't until actually the first year of the pandemic that I was able to make comics my full-time job. So you're going to get discouraged. You're going to get down on yourself. I urge you to power through that. Keep your eye on the prize, and like Paulo says, like, do it because you love it, because that's what's going to get you through some days. Because at least initially, you're not going to get a lot of people patting you on the back, and it's an incredibly competitive industry. So again, just expect to have to long haul it.
All right, now the fun part. Are there any future projects that you guys can tease our audience?
Dan, you want to go first? I feel like you got the most the plug.
Sure. Well, aside from this amazing book, Halloween Man Meets Latex Avenger, I'm also working on Bigfoot Knows Karate Chapter 2, Born Under a Bad Sign right now. That will be on Kickstarter in October this year. So please check that out. You can find out more about the project at bigfootknowskarate.com, or you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Danomite139, DANOMYTE 139. Especially on Instagram, you can follow along with that. I'm posting artwork from the book, and Casey's posting stuff from there as well. So Bigfoot Knows Karate Chapter 2, October 2022, Kickstarter.
So a lot of things are in flux with Halloween Man right now, and that stuff I'm going to be able to go into tonight. But I can say that Halloween Man issue 28 is coming out on Comixology very soon. It's the second part of our big Mr. Hyde story, because one of my goals is to hit all of the sort of famous monsters of filmland throughout the history of the comic. So I finally got around to doing Mr. Hyde. And it's looking really good, and it's coming together nice, and I'm really proud with how it's coming out. But I have to keep tight-lipped about a lot of my future projects. But if you're curious about that and curious about what I do, absolutely follow me on social media. On Instagram, I'm Drew_Halloween, and on Twitter, I am HalloweenManCom. All one word, all lowercase. And if you want to follow Halloween Man on Facebook, it's just www.halloweenman.com. Takes you right to our Facebook group.
And as far as for me, I actually want to start something after this. I'm actually working on another project for someone else. But I don't know how much I can say about that one. But I do want to work on a comic of my own, which is actually a work that I started writing it with Dan. Actually, at one point we were at part of a collective to make stories, to make comic book stories, and to make comic books. And we worked on it, and we never did anything with it. But I really like the story, and I really think there's an audience for it. But that's probably what I'm going to be working on after this, and it's basically Alienation, but like with souls. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but at the same time, but it's pretty awesome. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. And I really liked Alienation when I was a kid. I used to watch like reruns of that, and I like the idea of have aliens and we're like working together and all the weird stuff that they do, and like the whole crime drama type of thing. I thought that would be really cool. But yeah, you can find me actually on Instagram. Just look up PaulojHDZ, which is Paulo J Hernández, abbreviated. That's me on Instagram, or you can go to my website, which is www.paulojhdz.com, and that's my website.
All right, that beautifully ties in our next question.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? So we were just going to ask, where can people go to support your work? So,
Sorry,
did we miss
that's on me.
anybody?
I think we all jumped the gun on that one. I think I started that. My bad.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, I would say if you want to read more Halloween Man for the time being, check it out on Comixology. Search Halloween Man or Halloween Man Comics. If you want to directly support me, I am on Patreon as just Halloween Man Comics. And if you become a Patreon subscriber, you get to read the comics sooner. And you also get like lots of cool stuff, like you get to see scripts, production art, you get to be part of an exclusive fan chat every month. So it's a fun group of people, and it's a fun community.
To support Bigfoot Knows Karate, yeah, you can check that out. BigfootKnowsKarate.com. There's a link on there that will take you to my CWSBookstore.com web store, where you can pick up a copy of Bigfoot Knows Karate, the physical copy. If you mention this podcast to me in a DM, though, maybe I'll slide you a digital copy for free. So so happy to do that. So please mention Nerd by Word to me in DM over Instagram. I'll send you a Google link or something like that. Check out the comic. Here's the thing. I'm just excited for people to read it at this point in the game. I'm, so grateful to everyone on Instagram and Twitter who have taken part and, followed the book, everybody who supported the Kickstarter, people who, everyone at the conventions who have picked up a copy. I'm just happy for people to read it and hopefully, pick up, follow us for Kickstarter, for the Kickstarter in October for chapter 2.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, people, thank you so much for joining us today. Indiegogo, July the 6th. I get that right, Drew?
Yep.
Halloween Man meets Latex Avenger. Dan, Paulo, Drew, thank you so much for your time this evening, and all the best of luck to you in this endeavor and all those in the future.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, had a great time.
All right, thanks so much to Drew Edwards, Dan Price, and Paulo Hernández for taking the time to speak with us. Be sure to head to Indiegogo on July the 6th for Halloween Man meets Latex Avenger. Again, that's on Indiegogo, July the 6th, and support their work if you so can. When we come back from this, our final break, we are coming with 2 more patented nerd commendations. Stick around.
Hello, this is Lafayette. And I'm Carlos from Nerds Talking the Podcast. That's right. Where we talk about everything from UFOs, comic books, movies, streaming services, conspiracy theories, ghosts, video games, and more. Kick-ass. All on Nerds Talking the Podcast. You can find us every Friday with new episodes on all digital platforms where you find your favorite podcast, Nerds Talking the Podcast. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to our final and favorite segment. You know it as... All right, Dave, you've got a reclamation project of sorts with a particular creator, I hear.
Yeah, I had, I guess you could say, a falling out of sorts with the writings of one Tom King after a event comic he wrote for DC called Heroes in Crisis. I have spoken before on this show about the problems I had with the whole setup of the thing and how the storyline progressed and what the ultimate conclusion to it was. And so I didn't have a very, very high opinion of this writer's work at DC after that, and kind of avoided it. And I think it is time for me to maybe perhaps reevaluate that a little bit. I have spent some time getting caught up on some super adjacent books. As our listeners know, I'm a big Superman fan, and came across Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and I'm in love, Chris. I think there's no other way to put it. I think this is probably the best, most quintessential Supergirl story that I have read. It is amazing. It is sort of a sci-fi fantasy approach to the character with a healthy dose of true grit thrown in, which I think is so cool and such a neat approach to the character. It basically recasts Kara Zor-El as Rooster Cogburn in a lot of ways, which is just it is so cool. So basically the setup is that Supergirl turns 21 and has decided that she wants to get drunk. But she cannot, because under a yellow sun, she's so powerful, her body literally cannot get drunk. So she decides to fly as far as she can, hop onto a space ship, rent a spaceship and fly to a planet that has a red sun so she can sit in a bar and celebrate her 21st birthday. And her path, she crosses paths with a girl whose father was killed. And she is on a mission of revenge and basically enlists Supergirl through various circumstances to help her hunt down this guy. And of course, this girl's intention is to kill the killer of her father. And so Supergirl and this girl go on this epic journey basically through the cosmos, trying to hunt down this guy. And this 8-issue miniseries sort of chronicles their adventures together. And it is, first of all, gorgeous in ways that I cannot even begin to describe. The illustrator Bilquis is knocks this book out of the park. The facial expressions, even what Evely does with Supergirl's hair and how it frames her, it's the kind of gorgeous art that is absolutely through the roof. Since they are traveling, through space, there are all these different alien races they encounter. They're all interesting and distinct, and even the aliens that are glimpsed for like 2-page segments or something are interesting. And all the different planets they visit, you want to know more about. There are so many cool things about this book. The writing is sharp. Supergirl is, there's a nice contrast drawn here. This is something that the character oftentimes struggles with. I think a lot of adjacent characters struggle with that. I think, that's something that Nightwing struggled with a while. And how do you make Nightwing distinct from Batman? How do you make Superboy distinct from Superman? How do you make Supergirl distinct from Superman? And Supergirl here, she is incredibly distinct from Superman. Her attitude and the way she carries herself is very different from Superman, and still very super. She also, has a potty mouth a little occasionally when it warrants it, and I think that's really cool too, because she even, I think, mentions that Clark would probably chastise her for that a little bit. But she's, she's her own woman. There's a great scene where she is sitting like in a bar, and this guy approaches her, this alien, and it's like, your cousin threw, my brothers into the Phantom Zone. Are you Supergirl? Because if you are, I want to take my revenge. And she says, I don't know, I'm wearing a red cape and I got a big, S on my chest. Who the blank do you think I am? Like it's just, she is so good in this book. I have to say that it is probably my favorite Supergirl story, and I have read a bunch. And even standalone, just as a true grit and space kind of story, it just works from top to bottom. There was one thing about the last page I found a little bit disappointing, but everything else in this book clicked perfectly. Highly recommended. Read Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Right now, the first 5 issues are on DC Universe Infinite. The other 3 are still coming. I went ahead and I actually found the other 3 issues because I just wanted to finish the story. I couldn't wait. I know there's also a trade paperback that is scheduled to be released on July 26th. So if you prefer physical, you don't have to hunt down all the issues. The collected edition is coming out in just a little over a month. Just, however you decide to read this, DC Universe Infinite, physically, I don't care. Just go out and read this book. This is just such a good Supergirl story, Chris.
I really like what DC is doing with these like limited series, like mini or maxi series, however you want to classify them. Because I think for me, especially as a new DC reader, it makes it very much approachable. Like when I see this immediately, I think I see 1 of 8. I'm like, okay, so I don't have to like reset the wheel, and in terms of jumping on here. And it seems very new reader friendly. As far as the art, I'm already sold just looking at the covers. I mean, it looks like a fusion of like Frank Quitely and like Kenneth Rocafort and just like so many artists, a little Assad Rivich in there, and like other artists that I supremely enjoy their work. So I'm sold.
And the interiors, this is important to note, the interiors match the covers. I'm pretty sure the cover artist throughout was Everly as well. So I always hate when you have, a cover that looks one way and then you open the book and the art and the inside looks completely different. But there's strong consistency here. What you see on the cover is what you get on the interiors, and it's absolutely stunning, Chris.
And speaking of Quitely, and it looks like here is the case with the same artist. It's something I kind of take for granted with series like this, and something that I should have shouted when we were talking about All-Star Superman is just that consistency from one issue to another. I'm okay waiting for another issue if we can get like that consistency with the same writer and artist. I love that consistency. It like tells a complete story, and so that's something that I no longer take for granted.
Yeah, totally, man. It's kind of like game development. I'm willing to wait a little longer to get the best possible product, period. Not a huge fan of having to constantly use like fill-in artists and stuff, especially if there's a very particular, visual approach and creative vision behind the book. So I totally agree with that, man. All right, so what is your nerd commendation this week, Chris?
I talked about it on the Nerdies a few weeks back, and then we, of course, visited the writing of Al Ewing last week with Guardians of the Galaxy. But I think it's hard to say because, like, I keep saying, "Oh, this is better than that. This is better than that." I think it's 3 issues in, so I don't want to say this is the magnum opus. That's probably still on the shoulders of Immortal Hulk because that was just such a game changer. But like, it's an embarrassment of wealth when you're an Al Ewing fan and a reader of his work, because X-Men Red was probably one of the most anticipated X-Men books in recent years, simply because of everything that was developed coming out of Planet Size X-Men. And long story short, basically what happened is you had this segmented group of mutants from Arakko who were stuck in this this place called Amenth, which is like a portal, like a hellscape, and they were stuck there for thousands of years fighting back this horde of demons. And through the events of Planet Size X-Men, the Omega level mutants like Magneto and Storm and Iceman were able to colonize the planet of Mars, and terraform it. I don't like the word colonize, but terraform Mars, the red planet, and so hence the name X-Men Red. And so finally give a place for these Iraqi mutants that spent thousands of years away from their home. And rather than create just another island like Krakoa, they have now their entire planet. And so this book follows Storm, who was elected regent of the planet and the entire solar system. And like, what does that look like? Developing this new planet, this new government. How do you go about setting up this system without disrupting the traditional government setup and the social setup that the Iraqi mutants have done for thousands of years? So it's a very heady meta type, macro type book, but also the micro work and like Storm being an outsider from Krakoa, from Earth, being elected as this new leader, and she has to earn her place because, I mean, just imagine if you were transplanted onto another country that you're all of a sudden a leader of, they see you as this outsider, and she has to earn her place and earn the respect of this entire civilization. And then you have Magneto, one of my all-time favorite characters, who has fought for mutant rights and for mutant identity and mutant freedom, and really encapsulates like self-pride and love of self as far as mutant identity, and just truly one of the most compelling characters in all of comics. And he's in the latter stages of his life, and he's tired of fighting. And now that he feels this settlement of Arakko is like one of like a real nail in the coffin to where he can finally rest, almost like Thanos at the end of Infinity War. He can finally sit down and rest. But then events ensue. I don't want to give away too much. It's only been 3 issues. And then Roberto da Costa Sunspot is one of my all-time favorite characters. Just like that snake oil salesman type, very much like a Lothario, like a smooth talker, businessman. If you've read previous iterations of Ewing's work writing the character, like US Avengers or New Avengers, the way Al Ewing can just absolutely nail these 3 characters in particular, Magneto, Storm, and Sunspot, is just, it feels like it's written just for me. So X-Men Red, particularly the events of this 3rd issue, were just jaw-dropping. It gave me one of the greatest comic book pages I've seen in the past year. Just absolutely last page, one of those where you just have to sit back and take a deep breath. So X-Men Red, a very strong nerd commendation. Al Ewing, along with Stefano Casselli, is really changing the game with this book.
Okay, this sounds really interesting, and I do enjoy Al Ewing's writing. We've talked at length before about how I've had a hard time finding an in to the new status quo of, the mutants. But I am very interested in this kind of story, this sort of macro view, whether that, is mutant related or not. I'm usually fascinated by that kind of stuff. I do have to ask a question, though, because I think that's come up a couple of times in social media discussions that I've been seeing. Do you find, and I know what your response is going to be to a certain extent, but do you find ever that some of the current X-Men books maybe have strayed almost too far away from sort of the original mission statement of what the book and those characters were about?
I think that's a faulty frame of reference or a faulty grading system, because we're looking at that from like a humanistic, like from a human perspective. And so, for so long, the tagline to X-Men books were they protect a world that hates and fears them. And to a certain extent, at some point, rightly so, mutants got tired of trying to save the world for people who would regularly persecute them, and so I think this is a healthy separation of that and a readjustment of the ideals, because you still have the standard superhero, almost like when I nerd commended the X-Men main title by Jerry Duggan and company, is if you're looking for the big cape superheroics of the team, that's the book for you. But I see that more of as like an extension, like almost like an embassy. They have a treehouse in Central Park. And so they have this superhero team that is specifically, trying to save the world and do all the little things and stuff like that. And so I think, the self-preservation by mutant kind is really, really important, and they can still have those positive relations with the rest of the world. It's just they have to protect themselves first, and they had to establish that nation, because how many children did they have to continue to bury, to be honest? I neglected to mention before that this is the, for all intents and purposes, this is the successor to Sword. So the scheming of one Abigail Brand, the spearmint lady, takes place, continues here. So she's scheming in the background, and it's some real covert ops type machinations here that's really, really fascinating too.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, man. I'm very interested in this book. It seems a little bit removed from a lot of the Krakoa stuff because they're trying to set up their own government and stuff. So I might try to use this one as another attempt for me to find an in into this X-Men world and the new status quo. Sounds good, man. I'm there for it.
Sweet. All right. Thanks once more to our 3 special guests, Drew Edwards, Dan Price, and Paulo Hernández. Be sure to hit up Halloween Man Meets Latex Avenger on Indiegogo, July the 6th. And as always, if you like what you hear, please be sure to like, subscribe, review 5 stars on whatever your favorite podcasting platform is, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio app, or our newfangled fancy website, thanks Dave, nerdbyword.com.
And as always, you can find us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, at NerdByWord, or individually at @ThatNerdChris and at @ThatNerdDave. Tell us what you think we should talk about next. We're always interested in hearing all about what you think of our show.
And also hit us up on Discord, join our server. You can chat about comics, films, series that you're watching, games that you're playing. Give us your own nerd commendations. We've had a lot of great input from listeners like you, so be sure to do that as well. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, 2 nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez, with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.